Squeezing every bit of performance out of a NISQ-era quantum processor is usually handled in the software stack. But what if you could actually design QPUs for specific types of use cases? Our guest, Anastasia Marchenkova, is working on this approach. We explore the possibilities and benefits of these machines, as well as the remarkable awareness work she's been doing for years. In this episode of the Post-Quantum World, I'm your host, Konstantinos Karagiannis. I lead quantum computing services at Protiviti, where we're helping companies prepare for the benefits and threats of this exploding field. I hope you'll join each episode as we explore the technology and business impacts of this post-quantum era. Our guest today will need no introduction to those in the quantum community. She's well known for her various roles and publications and her social media presence, where she explains quantum to the masses. She's currently research engineer at Bleximo. Anastasia Marchenkova, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Tell us how you got started in quantum. I know for you, in some ways, it's a traditional approach.
In some ways it is, but I feel like sometimes this is a really disappointing story to people. You know, how did you get into quantum? How did you pick the field? And for me, I actually went to college as a computer science major, and then I switched to biology, and physics only came later. And what happened was I took a physics 1 class, and I was like, oh, I'm good at this. Okay, let's maybe look into this a little bit more. And it always fascinated me a little bit because, I don't know, biology was great, but it was a lot of memorization. I didn't want to do that. The textbooks were like 1,000 pages long. So I was like, that sounds boring. Computer science was great. I really enjoyed it, but I really wanted to use computer science as a tool more. So I kind of moved into sciences that way. And physics was actually hard. So I had to struggle, and I enjoy that, as weird as it sounds. And yeah, after that, I started looking for research positions. So I was already working in a chemical engineering lab doing transdermal drug delivery with microneedles. It was great, but the work wasn't really where I wanted to be. And part of my research of do I actually want to study physics was to go into a lab and actually work hands-on. And I started emailing professors. They don't really advertise research positions often on their websites. Maybe nowadays that's changed. 10-something years ago, that wasn't happening. And I just emailed them. And the first professor I emailed, I think it was a biophysics lab. And they're like, well, we really want you to have taken a couple classes on this level, right back your 4th year. And I just finished my freshman year. And the second lab I wrote to was a quantum optics, quantum telecommunication lab. And they're like, great, you can solder? Awesome. Let's bring you in. Can you come in tomorrow? So that's all I needed. And I had kind of electronics experience from robotics back in high school. So, they brought me in and I did research there for 3 years in the quantum space already, just in my undergrad. And I just kind of stuck with it. So ended up getting that degree in physics and kept going.
Yeah. And now you didn't really get away from large textbooks because quantum computing books are they're like phone book size,
They are really large, but you don't memorize that much.
That's
it's
true,
a couple of equations that you end up kind of knowing. I remember my thermodynamics textbook was 100 pages. It was called Mere Thermodynamics. And it was really covering just a couple topics. And the aerospace engineers, those was 1,000 pages, just problems of the different sort all the time. And they really did not like being friends with me during thermodynamics time.
And so we met 8 years ago. It was at the 2015 RSA conference. I cannot believe how far the industry's come since then.
Right.
Yeah, I was giving that talk, Quantum Keys, the Future of Encryption, and you were nice enough to come over and say hello.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember back in that day, I was a completely different person, which you could probably attest to. And part of doing my socials, I think, has trained me that way. But I was so nervous to approach you. I'm like, why would this person talk to me? I wrote one blog post about quantum and security, and I just so nervous. And here we are. And then I got to speak at RSA recently, so it was kind of like, oh, maybe one day I will be in his position speaking at RSA.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, no, you were really nice. And I remember you came over and you're working at Rigetti, and it sounded so far-fetched that a startup could be building a quantum processor, I almost in my head was like, what? How is this even possible? And it's not such a strange concept now.
I know it's really exploded since then. Rigetti was one of the only companies really around at the time. D-Wave had been around for many, many years, working in various fields there. But yeah, I actually started a company in between undergrad and grad school, and I'd done a couple years of grad school, decided startups are more fun. And at that point, how many people were in quantum and had done startups? At that point, it was, me and maybe a handful of other people. So made sense that I would kind of join in the very early stages of this crazy market that we're in now.
Yeah. And so how much has your day job changed from the Rigetti days to now at Bleximo?
Not that much. Well, it depends. Every day is so different. And I think that's true of any startup. And I think I enjoy those early stage startups. I've loved working. I'm just not a big company person. The biggest company I've worked for, I joined at about 100 something employees and went up to almost 1,000. And at that point, there were so many things that were, processes were already built, or there was a lot of maintenance, and I was like, no, let's go back and go work for a 4-person startup or something like that. So I just enjoy that day-to-day, everything is different. And, some days are very, very technical. And, some weeks I'm like, I haven't coded in 2 weeks because I've been doing decks and presentations and writing, and I just want to sit down and code a little bit. And then after a couple of weeks of code, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do something a little bit different. But it's fun building a company from scratch. I'm really grateful for the lessons I've learned from larger startups and seeing them grow, and working on the fundraising side, the operations, HR. There's so much to do, and it's a great time. But yeah, every day is different.
So give everyone a little high level of what Bleximo does.
Yeah, so Bleximo is another quantum computing company. We're in the hardware space, but our approach is a little bit different. So we're working on application-specific quantum processors. So people talk a lot about the NISQ-era, noisy intermediate scale quantum device era, where, some algorithms may actually work on smaller systems and pretty noisy qubits. This works because the circuit depths are not super deep. So when we talk about circuit depth, we talk about how many operations you do in a row. So for some of these, they're hybrid classical quantum algorithms, and you feed some part of the algorithm into the quantum computer, read it out, put it back into a classical machine, kind of do this rotation for a little while. So you don't need super great qubits. You don't need very long coherence times. And these algorithms that can run on these computers, hopefully will show quantum advantage in big areas. So chemistry, simulation, optimization. So they can affect a lot of industries, but they're not going to be able to run Shor's algorithm, for example. That's a very deep algorithm that requires a ton of qubits, and we're not at that stage yet. So Bleximo's approach is saying, okay, so we have these qubits. A lot of companies are trying to build universal gate systems, but we are not Google. We don't have infinite funding. And, we can't afford to, maybe spend, 20, 30 years to create, million qubit machines. What if we can optimize the chip itself to the algorithm? Because honestly, a pharmaceutical company wants to run quantum chemistry. They don't care if it runs a financial application as well, right? So you're going to be getting these machines for very specific purposes, and because you're selling to the enterprise. So that kind of started out the idea, and we've done research and we've seen, first of all, it makes it a lot easier to build, because if you design in a very optimal algorithm, you can say, okay, qubit 1 is connected to qubits 5 and 7. So let me just build those connections and optimize it in that way. I don't have to build every other connection. So the one thing there is quantum volume and connectivity is talked about a lot in quantum machines. You have to have full, all-to-all connectivity. We believe that, yes, that's very important in the long term. But right now, if we can optimize to that, the connectivity needs to be exactly for the problem you want. So we've seen through software and through our hardware designs, 10x improvements in, the number of qubits that would be needed for certain tasks. So now we're working on building those things. we're also working on a lot of the peripheral systems. So they are superconducting based. And one of the things there is you have to, keep it very cold with the cryostats, dilation fridges there. So we work a lot on the packaging. Our team has a lot of expertise. And, honestly, the qubits themselves are not everything. The number of qubits isn't everything. And you can increase coherence and fidelity of these chips by, working on the peripherals as well. So one of the things that I mentioned here is Google actually has very low coherence times compared to IBM systems, but their engineers are so talented at squeezing out performance on the software side that it almost doesn't even matter at that point. They can do a lot on that. So you have the software side you can optimize. We work a lot on the fridges. So we figured out that we took someone else's chip and we put it in our shielding and packaging and increased coherence times 5x just by, changing the shielding and packaging of the dilution fridge. No other changes. So there's a lot of different tracks going on as well here, but it's an exciting time.
So are you then going to try and have other companies that make quantum computers do that, like actually like package with you for better performance?
Yeah, so we've actually sold a few systems like that already to academic institutions, and they've seen the results, seen the improvements, and we're talking to some investors in the space. They're like, you know what, being an arms dealer during the quantum race is not a bad business strategy either. There's a lot of dilution fridges out there. We're building our own custom system for education as well. So the idea is that cooling down chips sometimes takes a long time. And once it's there, if you don't need to swap it out, fine. So a permanent system can be expensive. But if you're a student that wants to learn more, if you're doing a lot of testing and iteration, which is what we're doing, you want to have faster cooldown cycles. And, for education, also cheaper is better. And you don't need more than a certain, a handful of qubits for a lot of this educational time. So we're building kind of a low-cost educational system. It's not going to get as cold as the more expensive systems, but enough to, work on the quantum workforce as well. There's a huge talent shortage in the quantum space. So that's kind of our approach to that angle as well.
Would that be the Rubicon machine? Yep. Okay.
The Rubicon platform.
Yeah, I saw that at Q2B.
Every now and then online too. We've been doing, actually fed our line drawings and our CAD into Midjourney to see what it would come up with and do designs on that. So that's been a little fun experiment. But people are excited about that. It seems to be picking up, and now it's like, oh, now we have to build so many of them.
Yeah, good choice. Midjourney is more of the sci-fi looking output compared to DALL-E, which looks a little flat comparatively.
It does, I feel like I'm finally getting Midjourney. It's a feel,
Mm-hmm.
For a long time I was like, no, Midjourney feels a certain way, and then I figure out how to get around it. But so it's a fun little experiment, on my side. My side time.
Yeah, anything that improves the general appearance. So what are you planning then? Are you going to have these chips that are going to literally be named by the industry, like the chemistry chip, the financial chip? Is it going to be that kind of thing, like a line for each?
Yeah. So, we can optimize to a certain level. So the idea is, and we have sold chips, once you give us a problem, we can work with the algorithms team, the hardware team to really optimize to your specific problem. However, we can make a more general chemistry chip that maybe is 80% of the improvement. And our plan is to eventually put those up in the cloud once we get to a certain qubit count and say yes, this is the chemistry chip, this is the optimization chip, this is the financial chip, and, show improvements over the universal systems at this point. So.
Oh, that's a really great approach. Okay, so it won't just be selling a box to someone. You will just have the chemistry service, the ways to log in and get to each one.
Yeah, we're looking at it as kind of the customer lead acquisition, right? If you can show a good improvement, even with not a fully optimized chip, for companies where that extra 20% matters, they're the ones that are going to pay for it and have the money to pay for it. They're going to pay to get the last 20% of performance out of there. So it's kind of the introduction to that NISQ quantum application specific space.
Yeah, you brought up like Google before. Sycamore now feels really aged, right? I mean, it feels like that processor's been out forever, and the very latest papers they're putting out are still Sycamore papers. Like you said,
Yep.
they're just squeezing out that little bit of approach.
Yep.
So you're still refining the stack as you go in hopes of this cloud like platform to take shape.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's a startup, right? There's so much
Hmm.
to do.
Hmm.
Yeah, the hardware is definitely our focus. That's what we have our strength in, but we're gonna have to build the connections. We're talking to folks. There's nothing wrong with connecting to Amazon's Rocket service or Circ or any of that. That's totally open up in the air. Just keep building, testing out control electronics, building out those drivers is the whole thing. So yesterday we had a discussion on that. And yeah, keep going, keep producing the hardware as well. I mean, hardware is such a different world from software.
Hmm.
I'm amazed now how the world actually functions with like the way you have to work with machine shops, for example, to get parts done. Like how can we just buy a laptop and it works? It's actually incredible to me. So exciting journey there. Yeah, the software stack is starting to be built up. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, it looks crazy just when there's a new Apple silicon chip. Now you can imagine once you introduce the quantum level here, what happens. Um, so, what types of companies and customers are you targeting in the short term to try and keep growing?
Yeah, so we do have the great, academic partnerships.
Hmm.
So we're founding members of the Advanced Quantum Testbed out in Berkeley. We work very, very closely with the university. We've sold chips to universities as well for testing. We sold packaging solutions for these. For the actual application specific, we're building relationships, and it's the typical stuff, and I tell people like I'm sick of this too, but simulation, oil and gas
Hmm.
industry, pharmaceutical industry, financial industry, those are the common suspects. They're also the ones with money to pay, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
right.
There's nothing wrong with reminding people that this is a real industry growing, and real potential benefits will be seen very soon. So, do you have any other future plans or roadmaps you'd like to tease here? Something you hope to see
Oh,
hardware wise?
I think I've covered. I mean, Rubicon
Yeah.
was really exciting. So we launched it at Q2B, and that was kind of our test for the market to see what would happen. And that's really exciting to me. Again, I mentioned the quantum workforce is something. I've been working on a NFT project, and I know it's not trendy right now, but that's another side thing. I was like, what if we're working on the dilution fridge. We want to, have it as an educational thing. What if we sell the CAD designs as NFTs so people could actually like 3D print their own like dilution fridges or stuff like that and learn that way? Because that's actually what we do. And at Bleximo, so one of our processes for prototyping is we 3D print first. And you saw our
Hmm.
3D printed fridge as well there. We do that because it's way less expensive than going to the machine shop and screwing up on, gold plated hardware or
Yeah.
copper.
I was going to say you're not going to print with that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I was like, what if we do this crazy thing? So we'll see. We'll see all my free time, that I have to, learn blockchain engineering and NFT stuff. We'll see if that happens. That's just a little fun side thing
And the neat
with
thing
it.
with Rubicon was, I guess, the size. It looked like it will just be very rackable one day, right? It looks like it could just be tucked away in something.
Yeah, exactly. So we're fitting it into a standard half server rack. So the
Hmm.
idea is, a lot of these systems in the long term also will need to speak to supercomputers or, be in a data center. So you just plug it in at that point and hopefully, it there's connections there to make it happen. But yeah, I've talked to a few folks at the data centers and it's like, yeah, we can if we can put it next to the machines that would, significantly help in terms of adoption and have all that connected.
Yeah, it'll make them feel like it's a real technology they can bring in house finally. If it doesn't need a
Right.
special lab room or something. So I thought
Yeah.
that was a smart design. Um,
Yeah. It's also not as cool, I know, as the steampunk chandelier, but it's we'll make it cool on video somehow.
yeah, it's what's inside. That's the cool video, and then you seal it up to be practical. Obviously, you have to seal up anywhere. You'd be dead if you ran it, but it gets cold. So Outside from Bleximo, you do so much with awareness. I mean, your writing and videos have been tremendous forces for that in the industry. You've even given textbook recommendations, not just here on the podcast, but in general. And I'm sure several folks have been inspired to join our ranks by watching your stuff. So that's really great. I love to see that. I'd love to talk about how you find time for that and how it's enriched your interactions with the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I started writing a blog back in graduate school, and that was because I kept getting the same question over and over, and I got tired of people who are having to rewrite it over and over. So I said, okay, I'm just going to write a blog post about it. So it's always been kind of a part of my life, and for me, writing is hard. I mean, English is my third language, so even though I'm very fluent in it, there's still, stuff I struggle with. I went to a technical school, and one of my biggest regrets now is not taking public speaking courses, not taking more writing courses, these skills that people don't realize how important they are. Like, communication is so important. So it became a way for me to really organize my thoughts and to really understand what I was learning, I guess. I think it was third year. I remember it was third year that I learned that people just say words and they don't know what they mean. And I would never say anything without being 100% able to defend it or know what it means. So writing was a way for me to kind of put all my thoughts down, become more eloquent, and just practice those skills that I didn't have. So I started that, and it was just kind of a hobby. I'm not a big, I don't know. My hobbies, I guess, are a little more limited. I don't go out and party all the time, and I like being at home and waking up early, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to write. And I just saw so many people asking questions that I had the answers to, and I wanted to spread it out more. Like, I grew up in an academic family. My dad is a physics PhD. So I knew the PhD was a pathway, and I didn't realize until I started writing, people are like, oh, I wish I could go get my PhD, but I can't afford it. I'm like, PhDs are free. I always knew that growing up in that academic family, but a lot of people didn't know. So I thought, why not just put it out there and maybe someone, finds it and gets inspired. And just documenting, I've always been a big fan of YouTube, and, people are just like, you should just pick up the camera and do something. And the big push in social actually happened to me. I always knew it was valuable because I was just meeting so interesting and great people through even just my blogs. And I knew that was valuable, and I knew that gave me opportunities that I didn't have because I dropped out of my PhD. So I didn't have that, degree kind of, don't want to say notify or something else, just like saying oh, you have a degree, PhD in this field. But my content was out there in public, so people knew what I was talking about. But YouTube started because the pandemic began and people had been asking me for videos. I had 2 videos up on YouTube, which is that Best Quantum Computing Books one and a vlog from Qiskit Camp out in Switzerland, I believe. That was the Switzerland one where I vlogged it just for fun. And I'd watched a Gary Vee video on marketing, and they said, go on TikTok. It's the next big thing. You can dance? Fine. Put the camera up and, record 2 videos a day just talking about what you know. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this for 30 days. I actually did it with a coworker from another job that I had. We're like, we're going to do this challenge for 30 days. After 30 days, I think I had 14,000 or 16,000 followers. So I was like, okay, there's something there, so people want to hear more about it. And I remember I actually made a friend because he saw my TikToks and was like, I have to know who this crazy person is, thinking they can teach quantum on TikTok. But, it just helped me see that so many people were interested in learning more about it. And I had kind of the expertise, and I could bring people into that world. And then from there, it kept spiraling, right? And I was like, well, people are asking me questions, but I need more than 60 seconds to explain this, so I guess I have to make a YouTube video. So then I started making, then YouTube took off, and then that whole thing. And I just kind of, spiraled from there. And as you mentioned, it was just about what do people find valuable and what are they asking me? And I kind of just made videos to do with that, and it worked. And I know it's so stupid. People talk about how do I get into this field? I'm like, just do it. Like, it's the worst advice, but that's the same advice I got. And I thought it was stupid. No, I need to prep. Just do it. Just answer questions that people have about your field. And that's the best way to start.
Yeah, I've heard some crazy advice. It's like, just make 100 videos and then you'll get better. I'm like, okay, wow, 100 videos. Sure.
You will get better.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You learn storytelling and editing. Some of my favorites were ones where you kind of take on like a myth busting angle, like something here, because I know certain things drive me crazy and I have to explain over and over and over and over again, so I don't know if you wanted to hit us with a couple of recent, myths that you wanted to like smash, things that kind of like have been driving you bonkers lately.
Oh, it's almost the same myths. So the TikTok algorithm is really interesting, right? I'll scroll and there's people really into like quantum leaping. So I get that in my feed a lot. That drives me a little bit up the wall where I'm like, and I'm not like anti kind of all of these things. Like, I think sometimes thinking about like, this is going to be controversial. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Like, astrology like is an interesting framework to think about things in, like the idea that, Libras are better at sports. But Malcolm Gladwell in his book said, athletes tend to be born in September because that's the beginning of the school year. So if you just replace like beginning of the school year with Libra, like it still works. The pattern is there. So yeah, the quantum leaping stuff is in there. And I'm like, okay, it might be an interesting framework. But I get people who are really aggressive about like the last Nobel Prize. So that was actually like basically the basis of my entire undergrad degree. And like these people are coming in telling me like I'm wrong. They can like quantum leap into a different universe because of like the Nobel Prize. And I was like, guys, whoa. I've been working in this field 15 years. I understand this works, but the biggest myth that comes out of it is that information travels faster than the speed of light. I've been trying to debunk that for many, many years. No one listens to me. And this Nobel Prize, they're like, you're wrong. All your videos are wrong. No. We've known about these Nobel Prize experiments for many, many years. So that's a big one that I keep trying to say. It's like, and it's a very subtle point, so I understand why people struggle with it. Faster than light communication is a huge one, and this is where I start thinking about like education, right? And I have one of my minds there, and one I've been thinking for the longest time has been, we need to make quantum more accessible. Why are we calling things Hadamard gate? It's not very intuitive. A lot of fields have a lot of words that are intuitive, and that kind of maybe makes them harder for people to learn or understand. We use a lot of terminology that, people don't understand. On the other hand, I was reading this book last year called Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It's like a story about this guy that like cryogenically freezes his wife to find a cure for her disease, and then himself, and like goes forward all this time to try and wakes up to try to see if there's a cure for her illness. And in one of the jumps, language has evolved, so you speak math or you speak writing, and those are completely different languages. So I'm like, wait, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. Maybe we do create a whole new language. Maybe we don't teach quantum. It's not intuitive because the language structure that we currently have is not intuitive. Like, can we do something there? So it's a tangent, very idle thought on that I've literally like last week thought of, maybe there's a different approach to that education aspect.
Yeah, because I don't think anyone wants to speak math, that's for sure. Max Tegmark tried that with his mathematical universe. I don't know if you ever saw that, and that's a pretty scary approach for some folks. Yeah. So to keep on that like negative note with myths and things, what are things in the industry that worry you right now?
I mean, it's a hard time for quantum hype. I do think we're a little bit past the peak, but last year was rough, and it worries me that so many. Well, I'm actually not gonna say this because the people that I respect always held true to their morals, and they're scientists. But I'm seeing a lot more people now coming back and being very truthful about where the challenges are. So it's sometimes when you get marketing involved and you have to fundraise, right, that there's a lot of promises that you can make, and people who are knowledgeable about the space will invest, be disappointed, and that's kind of had a very negative effect on the industry. So that part worries me. And, this is part of why I started my writing. Is there was very simple pop science explanations. There's the papers, and I want to be a little bit in between and have like maybe the average technical person, understand what's going on. So I've seen like getting better. Actually, at Q2B, I was talking to the Quantinium folks, and their scientists were so on point. I was so impressed, and they're like, here's the challenges that we have. Like, we don't know how we're going to do this, and, in the same way, I try to be very honest in that way in my videos and everywhere. Like, yes, I've committed to a certain modality, working on the superconducting space. Do I think photonics still have a use? Yes. And I think, they just have different challenges, right? And so you still need a very complete picture of the quantum space to truly understand, So, trapped ions, they're like, well, our coherence times are super long. And I'm like, yes, but gate times are also longer, right? The shuttling, time of the ions. Superconducting, yeah, our manufacture, like that's what we're working on, manufacturing. There's a reason that we hired mostly engineers at the beginning, because that was the challenge. Oh, you need expensive cryogenic systems. Like, yes, that's a thing. Laser cooling systems are also expensive, So you have folks that are maybe giving an incomplete picture, photonics, millions of qubits, sure. But but there's always a but, right? Because we still don't really know who's going to get to that point. I've committed to certain directions. Other people have committed to their direction. But I think there's space for a lot of these modalities to really change technology as a whole. Obviously, I've never wanted to do quantum telecommunication with superconducting qubits. That's just not what it's good for. Number cruncher, that's kind of what I see it for, which is why this application-specific problem space works for it. But of course, we're never going to be like, yeah, we're going to do quantum telecommunication here. It just wouldn't make sense. Even if it, would raise $1 billion in funding, it's just not truthful.
So you don't have any significant concerns like a quantum winter or anything like that?
I think we're in it already. So I've kind of just come to terms with the last, I'd say like the last 4 months were already pretty difficult. So I think I'm just maybe steeled myself already. It's already here. We're going through it. We're surviving. And this is again why I talked about like I like the idea of the arms dealer in the quantum race, right? I'm excited for it in some way because I think it's going to force people to really start commercializing technology, and I think that will have a positive effect when we start, sharing more information between us in the end. So still early, we're all still friends, and maybe we won't be friends in a few years, but we'll see.
Well, we definitely will be, but yeah. So I guess what trends now are you most excited about? Like what's your most optimistic take? What's exciting you?
Oh, in the quantum space?
Yeah.
Specifically? Trends. I don't know. It's not a very trendy field. We've been working on it so long.
Yeah. Well, just like through lines you see coming to fruition, things that are approaching.
Yeah, I mean, so in our space, just seeing that educational aspect ramp up, we never thought lasers would be such a big deal until they were. Now lasers are used in everything. So just having more people involved in the field is exciting to me. I'm really excited, actually, the US is finally investing in quantum telecom technologies and quantum security. So that's been a huge thing. I know it's been always kind of in the back of people's mind, but quantum telecom, China was and still is way ahead of us on this. But there's a company, Connect, that they're doing great things in the US. I'm really excited to see that spinning up and kind of starting to actually run networks and lines there. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I was really excited to finally have you on here. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. So excited.
Yeah, it's really good to connect again. And I wish you lots of luck. And I know I'm excited to see what future things your company does. And of course, the things you put out on your own.
Oh, thank you so much.
Now it's time for Coherence, the Quantum Executive Summary, where I take a moment to highlight some of the business impacts we discussed today in case things got too nerdy at times. Let's recap. Bleximo has taken an application-specific approach to building quantum computers. Rather than just optimizing with software, they're also getting extra performance from their hardware by designing QPUs to operate more efficiently when running specific applications. Thought is given to which qubits need to be directly connected to each other, for example, to run certain gates of a specific application more efficiently. This will lead to QPUs that are suited to groups of use cases, such as chemistry or finance, while lowering complexity and costs. It's a novel way of building processors that has already shown orders of magnitude of improvements in execution time with fewer qubits. The company hopes to eventually have these systems available on the cloud for ease of access by use case type. Bleximo is also making small, half-rack size dill fridges, like the Rubicon platform, ideal for experimentation in educational settings. Anastasia has been spreading awareness about our industry for quite a while. Be sure to read the show notes for links to Anastasia's writing and social media. That does it for this episode. Thanks to Anastasia Marchenkova for joining to discuss Bleximo and her personal writing and videos. You can see a video of this interview at our YouTube channel. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to Protivity's The Post-Quantum World, and maybe leave a review to help others find us. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Constant Hacker. That's Constant with a K, Hacker. You'll find links there to what we're doing in quantum computing services at Protivity. You can also DM me questions or suggestions for what you'd like to hear on the show. For more information on our quantum services, check out Protivity.com or follow Protivity Tech on Twitter and LinkedIn. Until next time, be kind and stay quantum curious.